Hello there, and welcome to Healing the World Together. I want to introduce you to someone. She is a client. She is a forensic and coaching psychologist. That's a mouthful on its own. And also a former academic. Actually, the last time we spoke, you were still in academia. And Erica's mission is to disrupt the legacy of trauma so that people can grasp their second chance at life. You'll get to understand why I get so excited when I read that. Be that professionally or personally. So she gives you a second chance. She also works in sectors with individuals, small businesses, organizations that share her passion by creating a better future for others. Erica, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to be here. Um, when you came on a few minutes ago, I said you look different and
Mm.
you're glowing only because I remember the woman who came to me a year ago.
Yeah, and it was a year ago. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
remember the woman who came to me a year ago, and life has had its different twists and turns and everything. And we'll go a bit more into why I sort of like said yes later on. We'll just keep the audience guessing for a while.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I just get so excited when I get excited when I watch everything that you're doing.
Thank
I
you.
just think it's um yeah, I think you've come a long way, whether you've realized that or not, and what have you. And I'm just excited. So do you want to tell people, give people a bit more flavor as to what it is that you do?
Sure. So, like you said, I'm a kind of uh, a two-pronged psychologist. I don't quite know how to describe it. I'm a psychologist, I guess is the
You are a
basic.
psychologist.
Um, but yeah, but I've spent a long time in the field of forensic psychology. That was kind of where I grew my psychology wings, I guess.
Yeah.
And about 6 years ago, retrained as a coach and have formally qualified as a chartered coaching psychologist, which is a very long way of going about really describing the fact that I'm fascinated by helping people create a better future for themselves. And that's been, I think, the golden thread through everything that I've ever done, regardless of what kind of psychology.
Yeah.
And the way that I guess embrace that now is through coaching and consultancy. So the coaching I do predominantly women, and that's not an active choice. That tends to be who come to me, who are, I guess, just at a bit of a personal professional crossroads. And that can sometimes be because circumstances have forced them into that crossroads.
Yeah.
So, redundancy, for example. Or it can be that they've just hit that point in life where they've gone, you know what, I'm really not sure what's next for me. And I think I've probably been in that space myself. I was certainly there this time last year.
Yeah.
Um, I've definitely been there probably about 2 or 3 times in the last 5 years alone, of just feeling that I wasn't quite where I should be, wasn't
Mm.
quite doing what I should be doing. And I guess that should with a small s. But just that sense of just not feeling aligned with what I was doing, loving the work, but it just not quite fitting,
Yeah.
and not really knowing what it was that it was rubbing up against, or any of that. And that's very much when we met last year and we worked together, very much where I was. I think was just kind of feeling at that time really in the weeds of everything, of
Yeah.
being completely kind of, I don't know really what I'm about anymore, and feeling really, really lost with it. So yeah, so I guess my coaching helps people kind of transition away from that.
So I'm just going to give people um, a bit of context because we've mentioned it a few times.
Yeah.
So when you came to me, one of the biggest things you wanted to understand was why you're here, like what your purpose was. You were torn between doing the right thing and
Yeah.
where your heart sings and everything else. And when I give you a purpose, it's very intuitive, no questions asked.
Hmm.
And and the reason why I remember yours so vividly is because as soon as I gave you your purpose, you just burst into tears. And I was
I
like,
did. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us why you cried?
Um, I tell you what, it was such a peculiar experience. And I no, and I mean that is with the
People say
deepest
that
of
when they work
respect.
with me.
No, because I think, I've grown up professionally
Mm,
as someone who has been very wedded to logic and frameworks and science and research and everything else, but also with a really deep curiosity about people and other approaches. And I think that's part of why I've always felt a bit torn in the work that I do.
yeah.
And so coming to you, I was like, I am just deeply curious about you. And I loved your energy. And I was like, but I have no idea. Could it work for me? Was my deep cynicism. Because I
Mm,
think that's where I was. I was just like, I'm not sure that anything can work to give me that clarity around that feeling that I had of I just don't know what I'm doing or who I am or which way is up. So when you said to me what my purpose was, no kidding, I felt like I had been emotionally shot. And it was like a palpable physical sensation. I had goosebumps on my arms and the tears just came. It wasn't like anything that I controlled. They just came forward because it simply felt true. And
mm,
it was the weirdest experience of just that embodied sense of knowing and going, you know what, that's absolutely it. And it's the thing that I come back to all the time. It now just bumbles around in my mind. Everything that I'm doing, it's that benchmark of, okay, does this really fit? And so, yeah, that's why there were tears. It was because it's like, oh my God, you just managed to go, but that's what all of your entire life and being has been about. From simply listening to me mumble on.
Do you know what's so funny is, and I say this to clients all the time, when you get given your purpose, and we're going to tell you what you're going to tell them what the purpose
Yeah,
is. But I say to people, when you get your purpose, it's not that it starts to give, it doesn't always give you the result straight away, even though a lot of people it does happen because you
yeah,
went away and came back a few months later
I
and
did.
it was nuts. Like the
Yeah,
business had just gone crazy. But you have to keep on going back to it for it to come back to you. Like it's a
yeah.
two-way thing. So the fact that you say you always think about it, that it's at the back of
Mm,
your mind, so is mine. Very much so. I know why I'm here. Everything I do is because of it. If it looks as if I'm going off track, I bring myself backwards.
mhm.
It's almost like my navigation or what people call your true north. Like
Yeah.
you have to come back to what aligns you, and that's your purpose. So I'm really pleased that you say that. Do you want to tell people what your purpose is?
So my purpose is to give people a second chance at life.
Amen.
And I think there was something about just that configuration of words,
Mm,
because I think I always felt I was here to make the world a better place. It's quite pithy and it's quite grand
mm,
and a bit obscure. You can't really get your fingers into it.
mm,
And I think the way that you framed it, it was just like, actually, my work as a forensic psychologist has been about preventing domestic violence.
mm,
And that's giving people in that context a second chance at life,
mm,
and the women and children that are most often
mhm,
impacted by domestic violence, but also the people that engage in those behaviors, which is something we don't really acknowledge, is that they might also want a second chance at life. And then even as an educator, and a lot of the people that I've supervised who are PhD students tend to be midlife, mature PhD students who are coming into education to transition away from what they were doing before. And it's simply been a recurring pattern that I'd not even really noticed. And then when I have looked back at the coaching clients that I've actually had in being just, the way that no matter how I've described my coaching and what I do, the people that have come to me have been people going, I'm here, but I want something different for me. And so it just became, it was like somebody opening the window and going, look, that's what you do, because that's what you've always been doing. Like, you know, it doesn't matter which way you look at it or what aspect of the work that I've been doing,
mm.
that's what it's been about.
And before I move to the next question, do you just
Mm.
want to tell people what happened? I can't remember if it was like a couple of months later
Yeah.
when you came back. What happened?
So it was that sense that I'd kind of gone away and looked at everything that I'd previously created. And there had been, I think with all things, you kind of your thinking gets swayed, you get influenced by people,
Yeah,
and you kind of go in different directions. You think, well, maybe this time this will be the thing. And I was like, oh, I looked at it all back at it and was like, well, it's all part of the thing, but it's not the whole thing. And so I think I came back to you and had just sat down and gone, okay, actually, the real process underneath my coaching has been completely reclarified. So I
amazing.
now have something called the Emerge Blueprint, which is my coaching approach. And it's not a kind of 15 session and you're out kind of thing. It's just the way coaching works for people, regardless of how long I work for them. But I now have a really clear sense of all the components that I bring together into that coaching approach. And so I can talk about it differently. And when you have clarity on what you do and who you work with, then people respond to that differently. And it's through everything, even my email newsletters now, I get people emailing me off the back of the newsletters that I send out. Um, I've created a new leadership pattern assessment, which brings all of that together. And I've had people email me off the back of the results that they get from taking it. So it's just given me that clarity on what I do
Yeah.
and that grounding to just feel confident in it and to go, actually, rather than faffing around and coming up with yet another coaching approach or working with yet another business mentor, to go, actually, no, this is really what I'm about. And if I'm doing this, I know that I'm doing the work I'm supposed to be doing.
See, your purpose saves you money.
It does.
It does, it
Yeah.
saves you money.
Yeah, it
So,
does.
so thanks for that. Really, really useful. And like I say, you look different. I remember 2 months afterwards, you came to me and I was like,
Mm. I know.
we didn't record that session, but I literally was like, what happened? And it was and this is the fact that you've got a lot of stuff going on at home. It's not as if
Yeah.
life is simple or anything else and stuff, but you looked amazing. And even today you come on, I'm like, girl, I'm going, you look amazing. So
You.
let's talk about the disruption of legacy, the legacy of
Mm.
trauma. When you say that that's the mission for you,
Yeah.
um, when was the first time you realized that trauma wasn't necessarily isolated, that it could be more than personal, it could be generational, it could be
Oh,
structural?
I think I've probably known it all the way through my professional career, but just not embraced it.
Right.
And that sounds like really, really weird. So, and part of that is because of the way that actually we see, particularly the perpetration of domestic violence.
Mm,
It has been very difficult bringing a narrative in around trauma into that space for a
mm,
range of reasons. But that is now shifting.
mm,
And so I do some government consultancy work around offending behaviour and around what evidence says works. And
mm.
we're now seeing that narrative also come into that space as well. And I started that work 25 years ago, and we had a very different view of the people that engage in those behaviours and what we thought were the contributing factors, even though we know and have always known that there is a very, usually quite a deep background of trauma. And we would see it and the science would say so, but we would never bring it into the way that we worked with people.
Yeah,
We would never think, oh, well, maybe it actually impacts directly their behavior they're engaging in. So I think from that perspective, it was always acknowledged but not embraced. And I think for me, my own experience, I had a very intense experience of vicarious trauma about 6 or 7 years ago that made me start to think more about what goes on in the workplace. So that was even in higher education.
that. Yeah.
Okay. And I think it was really from that point that I was looking around and just seeing the way people are interacting and seeing the behaviors and reflecting on what people would classify as being problematic members of staff and just sitting back and going, You know what? This, I think, runs really quite deep.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I started to more fully embrace it. And then really retraining as a coach kind of gave me that space to go, actually, no, I really feel that I can point to it and bring it in and work with the whole person in a way that professional roles previously simply wouldn't allow me to do. Um, and, I guess when I first became a coach and having that psychology background gives you all of that, I guess, deeper understanding around human behavior anyway. But, getting really frustrated by the mindset lens that was put on coaching, because from my experience, people may come to me going, well, I don't really feel particularly confident. The moment they'd say that, I'd be like, okay, there's something probably slightly deeper than surface level going on for you, because there usually is. So
Yeah.
to call it just a mindset issue also felt like a disservice, and it's like, actually, I can't just go, we're just going to talk about, how you think about yourself, how you speak to yourself and all of that kind of stuff. Because actually we need to start looking a little bit behind all of that.
Yeah. It's one of the
Um,
it's one of the reasons why I listen, I'm sure people do a lot of work in mindset,
yeah.
but when I hear mindset, to me, I hear surface level. And to me, everything just runs so much deeper.
And I think this is it. And I think it's always, and part of the challenge is with being a psychologist as well and being a registered psychologist is working within professional boundaries and making sure that we're working within our competence and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then having the requirement for continuing professional development if we want to do anything that is different or at more depth. So you kind of sit there going, okay, I can see what the outcome is. As a psychologist, I'm trained in formulation, so I'm trained to think about what are the individual, relational, historical circumstances that have led you to this moment,
Yeah.
and how do we make sense of those together so that we can then work out actually what is really going on now. So the coaching space to begin with, when I went into it, was quite peculiar,
Yeah.
because I'm like, well, I'm definitely don't feel like a mindset coach, and to position myself that way didn't feel right. But then I'm not a clinical psychologist, I'm a forensic
Mhm.
psychologist. So it was all like all of those professional boundaries around what is my range of competence, what can I do? Um, and making sure that my clients are safe, because that's the most fundamentally important thing.
I love that. So a lot of leaders assume that their decisions come from strategy.
Yep.
Maybe they've done a training or something, so they're
Yep.
very in their logic mind.
Hmm.
But you argue that leadership is often the nervous system in disguise.
Yeah.
So what does that look like in practice?
So what it looks like in practice is sometimes the reactions to circumstances that don't quite make sense. So it could be that, so for example, going into a work environment that may be new. And yes, there's a level of newness around it that feels familiar because we know what new feels like.
Yeah.
But maybe there is below that a deep-seated tension in your gut. And it's that sense of that being persistent and not knowing necessarily why it's there. But you definitely know it's not the newness of the location. There's something else going on. And that can be because there's an aspect of the environment that is reminding your nervous system about something that was previously unsafe.
100%.
So it's that kind of maybe being aware of what's going on in your body, and sometimes not even that, because like you say, a lot of leaders are very cerebral, it's very logic, we're going to think our way out of a problem. It can be that everything is working absolutely fine, that you're working at 100 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden you completely collapse.
Mm.
And it's just that sense of where on earth has that come from? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, actually, you've been just sprinting towards overwhelm and burnout, and you weren't listening to your body. And so your body has forced you to listen.
Yeah.
So we can get that showing up. But you can also get things like micromanaging behaviors. You've got somebody in leadership who really, really can't let go, cannot delegate, cannot allow people to grow into their own roles. And some of those behaviors can be driven by that deep-seated insecurity, the fear of being judged, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of failing. And those fears can be an artifact of previous trauma. So we have a lot of ways of kind of disguising them and talking about all of these things that make it look like other stuff. We just call it burnout.
Mm.
We'll just call it, imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And actually, what's really going on below that is that your nervous system is reenacting scenarios that were previously unsafe and responding to perceptions of unsafety in your environment.
Incredible. Incredible. I mean, I could say a lot on that because just the safety aspect
Yeah,
is huge. And the fact that we ignore a lot of those signs,
we do.
and I can guarantee you that if we look at um what do you call them, like a safety audit,
Hmm.
I can guarantee you that that's not on there.
No,
And that's where we need to sort of like start to make people get awake, wake people up to this, that, you know, everybody's a human being first,
absolutely.
which means that we all come with our own versions of trauma,
Yep,
but we process the trauma differently.
yep.
And we need to get people to come in and do that education so that everybody can still have a life that they love.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and a quality of life that they love. So when we look at the corporate and entrepreneurial world,
Mm.
where do you see the trauma leading the room these days?
So trauma can show up, particularly entrepreneurially, if you find yourself repeatedly stuck. If you find yourself stuck, you work with someone, you think, yes, I've got this, and you go back into previously old patterns and you can't seem to find your way forward. You might find that you move forward a little bit, but then all of a sudden you step all the way back. You might let go of actually what are successful aspects of your business, believing that you should be doing something else.
Mm,
So you can get all of these, and it is all of those fears. It can be a fear of judgment, it can be a fear of success, it can be a fear of failure.
yeah,
It can be a fear of visibility, which is something I've definitely had to battle with. Um, which can come from a whole raft of things, and particularly if we've been bullied as kids, the legacy of bullying is horrific. So if we've ever been in environments where it's felt unsafe to be ourselves,
yeah,
for whatever that is, then we can find ourselves feeling unsafe in any aspect of our business, you know, in leadership. I mean, the organizations I tend to work with tend to have a focus on working very much with people.
yes.
So, we're talking about kind of like medicine, government, corrections, that kind of thing, higher education, unsurprisingly.
Mm,
And I think what we see there linked to trauma can be a whole range of things. So it can be the problematic workplace behaviors that are just, some individuals' expressions of their trauma. It can be the fact that we have a huge number of staff turnovers. We lose staff aren't engaging, we have teams that are dysfunctional. You can
disbanding.
absolutely, absolutely, and really, really poor communication. I mean, we look at higher education at the moment, we've got universities that are laying staff off left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
The way in which that is done can give you a huge amount of insight into the health of the leadership, from a trauma perspective. So you see it
Mm,
cropping up in a range of places. A lot of the time we talk about psychological safety.
yes.
I think for me, psychological safety is what we may or may not see between people. It's that relational safety.
Right.
But if we don't feel safe in ourselves, we're going to struggle to create relational safety with others.
100%.
So, we might find that there are people that are labeled difficult, or, well, they're not a team player. Okay, so what's that really about then? You know,
Yeah.
so you can just see it everywhere, and I think that's half the challenge, isn't it? It's like when you want a bus, you see them everywhere. You want a red car, you see them everywhere. When you look at things through a trauma-informed lens, you can see the dynamics
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. So I want to know, what patterns do you see
Mm.
when people are experiencing trauma or they've moved away from their purpose? So they're not, maybe not even thinking about purpose, but they don't realize that they're not living a purposeful living.
Sure.
What, what shows up? What behaviors show up?
So what showed up in me
Mm,
from that perspective was the kind of the stagnancy. And
mm,
it's almost like you get into this freeze state, which is, if we're looking at trauma responses, that freeze of not really feeling engaged, just keeping things ticking over,
yeah.
feeling quite detached and dissociated from the work that you're doing
Mm,
because it doesn't sustain you, it doesn't give you anything back. And that for me, I think, is the misalignment from purpose because you're putting in an awful lot of energy,
mm,
but you're not really getting anything back from it. And so you can then just keep on expending energy and you go further and further into collapse. I think when people are in that much more activated, kind of like hyper alert phase,
mm.
it depends what's really got them there and what their nervous system is reacting to. But for
Right.
example, if it is a fear of visibility, then what you'll find is that people will retreat and they won't be visible, and that may still be activated by that fear, that fight or flight response.
Yes.
They're trying to do is to flee from the thing that makes them feel unsafe, which is visibility.
That
So
happens
you
quite a
can,
lot, though. That happens quite a lot,
it
doesn't it?
does, it does, and and not all negative events are traumatizing.
No.
So there is that also that as well to play with.
Mm,
But I think for people where there is a history of invalidation, or in particular, I think a history of bullying, that owning your voice and feeling comfortable to speak up can be very, very deeply triggering. And so having to kind of move beyond all of those internal signals that you're not safe
yeah.
to show up and go, look, guys, this is me and this is what I do and this is what I'm passionate about, takes a lot of inner resource.
Fascinating. I could listen to you all day. Like literally, there's so much knowledge there and
I
what
could
have
talk to
you.
you all
And
day.
I almost feel like we need to get you on to do like a couple of other bits and for people to sort of like digest and make them
Sure.
really think and realize and see what's happening in their lives. Because for a leader or anyone, they hate thinking that they're experiencing trauma.
Of course.
But the behaviors
Yeah.
and the language that you've put to it is so good because then people can go, do you know what? I manifested these behaviors and I didn't even realize what they're connected to. And what you're doing
Yeah.
is you're shedding the light on that.
And I think also normalizing it. I mean, if you look,
Mm,
even if you just look at the data,
yeah.
going back to the nerdy part of my brain, but I mean, the data from PTSD UK, so that's the charity that supports people with formal diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
Now, the incidence of PTSD is very, very low, but they think that between 50 and 70% of the entire population have experienced at least one traumatic event in their life. Okay.
Mhm.
There's research which suggests that 40% of the global population have experienced at least four traumatic events.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going, you know what, we are people. Life is complex and hard and unequal. And we get caught up in events outside of our control
That.
that can create our nervous system patterns because they're simply designed to try and keep us safe. That's all they are.
100%. 100%. 100%.
And you don't have to have a formal diagnosis,
No.
but if you can tap into actually understanding your patterns for what
Mm.
they are and go, oh, that's really interesting.
Mhm.
I had a situation where I was in a workplace and couldn't understand the feeling that it brought up in me at all
Yeah.
until I thought, oh, that reminds me of a member of my family and my relationship with them. And you suddenly go, oh, that's what it is. It's
Mm.
actually got nothing to do with the workplace. It's what I've brought into it. And I think so often we focus outwards. We focus on, you know, the workload, the workplace, the leadership often. And sometimes what we need to do is to start looking inwards. And that's not to dismiss the impact of the external stuff. We know that, you know, if you give people too much work, if you manage them poorly, it is going to be devastating for them. And that's
Right.
not dismissing that at all. But I think there are things we can do to help ourselves that sometimes we just don't look for.
It's one of the reasons why I always say, because I focus on intuitive leadership.
Mm,
I always say to the leaders, I'm like, don't get angry, don't waste your energy,
yeah.
you know, don't waste your energy if you're not going to think about it strategically. Use your energy wisely, because if you're getting angry at someone for behaving in a certain way, you have no idea what connection to trauma
No.
that's finding its way through. And you're going to get angry at the person, and they're probably just looking at you going, I don't know what you mean, because I'm in my trauma right now and it's quite safe here.
And and equally, sometimes that anger reaction is an expression of their own previous experience,
Yes.
not actually an accurate reflection of really what's going on either.
100%.
So any of those, I'm going to say exaggerated, but what seem to be over exaggerated responses where it doesn't make sense. You think, why on earth did I get that angry with that person?
Mm, mm.
That's a nod to go, okay, maybe you need to start looking a little bit inside to work out what that's really about.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Erica. That was so useful. Have you got anything coming up soon? Have you got anything that you want to talk about that you're promoting?
So I have an assessment that I recently put out, which is my leadership pattern assessment, um,
Okay.
which most people will see probably on my LinkedIn page. Is probably the easiest
Right.
place to find it. And that will give you an insight into some of your nervous system patterns in your leadership, how you see them, whether or not you're in leadership or business ownership, it kind of applies across
Right.
the board, but also the extent to which your current role is meeting your psychological well-being needs. So it kind of gives you a bit of a profile about where you're at.
I love it. Well, we're going to put it at the bottom here so that everybody can have access to it.
Thank you.
And once again, thank you so much for coming, and well done. You're doing so well. It's just brilliant to watch you do what you're put on this earth to do.
Well, thank you for reminding me what that was.
Welcome. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Vicky.